Hello and welcome to Millionaire's Shortbread. This is definitely a favourite in our house. It's buttery shortbread topped with caramel and then finished off with a layer of chocolate. It never lasts that long, and actually the gluten-free bit is only really the shortbread. The rest doesn't have to change from the original recipe. And nobody can tell the difference. So it's a great all-rounder. And as the gluten-free person in our house, it certainly keeps me very happy. So the first thing to do is make the shortbread. Now, you don't want to cream it, so don't use one of the bendy kind of attachments if you've got a big mixer. I'm going to make it in the food processor with the sharp blade, which is, oh, it won't pop out easy. Oh yes, it will. There we are. I've got the sharp blade inside that. It also works really well with one of these. You sort of need to crumble it up rather than squidge it all together. If you've got neither of those, do it by hand like you would pastry. You do your butter and your flour and rub them together, then add the sugar, and that will work almost as well. Don't go and buy loads of expensive equipment until you know what you're going to use most often. So I'm going to put the butter, I've got the butter ready to go in here, a little bit broken up just to help it along. You may notice in the shortbread only recipe, the shortbread rounds, it's a different proportion of butter and stalk baking margarine that I use, and that's because it needs to keep its shape. If you use all butter, I've found it spreads a lot. So when you're making rounds, this recipe won't work, but it's perfect and buttery for when you've got it in a big tray. So the butter can go in. Along with the flour, and that has the psyllium husk in there as well. It didn't come in the flour, I should add. I just added it into the same bowl. And the sugar. And it just all goes in together. It will start to go, it's noisy, so I'll explain before I turn it on. It'll start to go into tiny crumbs with lumps, then it will all start to even out and it will suddenly sort of clump together. So that's all there is to it. I'll show you how that looks. So it's kind of a bit like sticky pastry. It hasn't quite come into one squidgy lump, but you don't need it to. It just needs to be combined. There are no floury or sugary bits and no lumps of butter. All you do then is put it in the tin. So I've just put some greaseproof paper in my tin. I haven't even bothered greasing it because if you just push it in and stretch it, push it into the corners, that's good enough, and it saves on washing up, saves the greasy bottom really. So we just tip that in. Make sure it all comes out. Here we are. Oh, is there a bit in there? And then with the back of the spoon, you just need to spread it out. So what I normally do is push a bit into each corner. And then work your way along. And actually, the way I prefer to do it is just with your fingers. Can you see there? I'm literally just spreading it out, and it always looks like it won't, but it will. I just need to work it a bit. It's a bit sticky, it's a bit of a faff, but that's just the way it is. It'll be fine. You don't want any holes in it. That's important, because when it is baked, you'll be putting the caramel on the top. Can you see how it's gradually filling the space? I'm just going to carry on with that until it's all in the corners. I'm just finishing it off with the back of a spoon again, so that didn't look like it would cover the whole thing, but it has. Some recipes call for a thicker shortbread. This one is sort of quite a nice crispy crumbly layer. It's easy to handle, it doesn't fall apart too much actually, so I like it. That's it. So we need to just prick the surface with a fork, and that stops any big bubbles forming, which will then crack the surface and it ends up a bit not too solid. So when you put the caramel on it, it causes a few problems. That can now go in the oven. So we are now going to make the caramel, and it's a bit of a funny camera angle, but it's really important that I can show you what the caramel is doing. The key thing is that when it's done, it changes slightly. It changes consistency, and that's what it's useful to see it, then you know what you're looking for. So I've put the brown sugar in a pan already, and now I am adding the wonderful double cream. I'm going to put the heat on low, because the first thing you want to do is dissolve the sugar at a reasonably low temperature, so it's all smooth, no lumps. Okay, so that is now a nice even melted consistency. I'm going to turn the heat up, and it will start to bubble quite a lot. What you need to do is keep scraping around the edge so it doesn't catch at any point, because the whole thing will go bitter. So the heat's quite high now, and you'll see around the edge it's starting to bubble and crackle, and that's what you want. You'll see we've got big sort of volcano bubbles now, and it's going a bit foamy on the top. That's good. It's spitting a bit now, which kind of hurts your fingers, so I'm turning it down slightly, but we do still want all of that foamy, bubbly stuff. I should also say this is really dangerous at this temperature. If it's spilt on your skin or something, it would cause some serious burns, because it's so sticky you can't just wash it off. But what we've got now is these paler bubbles around the edge, and it's almost like a foam on the top, a thick sticky foam. If I move the spoon, you can see it's almost like a bit of a skin, bubbly skin. It's thicker, it's darker, and it's got these kind of rows of little bubbles when you stir it. They're all over it. It's almost like a thick, stickier top to it. So I'm going to turn the heat off. There we are. That is done. That is amazing. It's very, very hot. I'm going to put that out of the way. That needs to be cool but not cold to go on the shortbread. So the shortbread will be out in a few more minutes. And basically we're just going to wait now till the shortbread is cold and the caramel is almost cold. So the shortbread has now come out of the oven. It's ever so slightly golden around the edges. It will be a darker golden underneath. So don't wait for the top to go really golden brown because it'll be too baked too much, and then it can have a bit of a sort of burnt bitter taste. So that has to cool in the tin. We can't turn it out because we need the sides of the tin to support the caramel when we pour it in later. So it's a waiting game now. The caramel is cooling and the shortbread's going to cool. So our shortbread and caramel have cooled nicely. This is pretty much cold. That's kind of lukewarm. It's okay if it's not absolutely cold, but it really mustn't be too warm because it will start to melt the butter in here again and you'll get a squidgy mess. So all we're going to do is pour caramel onto the shortbread. Spread it right into the corners. This is why we leave it in the tin. Nice and even. And that's it. And then it's a wait again for that to set. So it's tempting at this point to put it in the fridge. It will set faster. But then what happens is you melt the chocolate, try and spread the chocolate, and the chocolate sets on the cold caramel before you can spread the chocolate. You can speed things up by putting it in the fridge to set and then letting it come back to sort of roomish temperature before you put the chocolate on. So that's up to you. It's one of those recipes that is a bit long and drawn out. It's great for an afternoon at home where you can do a bit and then go and do something else while it cools. So I'm just going to leave this now, probably take a couple of hours, and then we'll just add the chocolate. So here we go for the last stage. I've melted the chocolate in the microwave in short sort of 30-second bursts. I prefer to do it in a plastic bowl because I find it doesn't get too hot. That can ruin the chocolate. So I'm simply going to pour it all over. There we go. I've got a palette knife, which is at a slight angle. This is just what I like to use. If you're wondering what it is, any knife, back of a spoon will do the job. And just spreading it out. Look, there's a lump of chocolate there, but it really doesn't matter. This is all about whipping things up easily, not trying to win any prizes in the local fete, although you might, who knows. There we go. And then what I've done is melt the white chocolate in a small plastic bowl. You don't have to do this, I just think it looks fab. And literally drizzle it all over. And that is it. You've got to wait for that to set now. So really, Might be tomorrow before this is cut up, but it won't last long. What I tend to do actually is leave it in the tin, cling filmed, and cut pieces off when we want them. But the longer pieces of greaseproof we left here will help you, once it's all completely set, firm and cold, lift the whole thing out onto, say, a cutting board, and then you can cut it with a sharp knife and enjoy.